If you want to know the secrets to the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Now, this is a quote from one of the most brilliant minds that ever existed on this planet, Nikola Tesla. And notice that he didn't say, if you want to know the secrets of the universe, you need to think in terms of material or in terms of the physical world. He said specifically energy, frequency, and vibration. You see, you are a powerful being that is able to communicate with the universe, source, or whatever it is you want to call it, in order to advance you further along your path here on Earth, for whatever reason you came here for. You didn't come here by happen chance, it's not redundant, and it's not this materialistic way of looking at things where you just somehow randomly appeared here. We live in a very finely tuned universe that operates through energy, frequency, and vibration. Now, what does advancing down this path actually look like in a practical sense? Well, first and foremost, it looks like you experiencing more of what you want to experience. You are here to experience. It looks like more of your desires being able to naturally come into your life from a higher level of consciousness. And of course, it does look like expanding yourself spiritually and mentally, but also physically as well. And once you learn how to communicate with the universe properly, it's like plugging in a destination into a GPS where it tells you exactly what you need to do in order to get closer to where it is you want to go. In fact, there are many tools that you already have within you that will allow you to communicate with source, the field, the all, and so on, that you may just not be aware that you have within you at this very moment. And so the point of this video is to help you become aware of these tools that are laying dormant within you, and of course, to help you actually activate them. Now, how these tools work, how you can use them to communicate with the universe, and of course, some actual steps you can take to make that happen is what we will cover in this video. Now, why is this useful? It's because when you strengthen this connection and actually connect to it, you're gonna know exactly what the best move is for you next to further you along that path. Again, just like a GPS telling you to go left or go right or go straight, and so on. So many people are confused, running in circles in their life, really getting nowhere because they have forgotten or were never taught how to really start operating this universal GPS and connecting to source, speaking to the universe so that it can guide you. And again, it's like you're taking one step forward, but one step back with no guidance on which way to go. You could be walking into a wall, continuously going nowhere and not even know it in this sense. Again, it doesn't have to be that way, so let's jump into how this actually works and how you're going to be able to communicate more effectively to source so that, again, it almost acts like a GPS for you, moving you further along the path of why you even came here, your purpose, and essentially moving you closer and closer to source. So let's jump into it. So the first thing to recognize is that we live in a feeling universe. Again, if we go back to that Nikola Tesla quote, that if you want to know the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, let's take a look at what that actually is. Again, I say we live in a feeling universe, and if we look at the word emotion, which is something we usually attribute to feeling, we have emotions, which are certain feelings. If we break down that word, it's really emotion, which is energy in motion. And again, what are the secrets, or how can you understand the secrets of the universe? Energy, frequency, and vibration. And so when we understand that we live in an emotional, vibratory, frequency-based universe, it gives us some clues to how we can better communicate and connect to it to help us along on our journey. Now, this isn't to say that the universe or the greater consciousness system has morality in the sense that we do. It doesn't. We're talking about pure energy and frequency here, not our judgments about energy or our judgments about certain things. It doesn't really have a sense of right and wrong in that sense. That is simply a value judgment that we ascribe to certain things. But it does have a spectrum of energy that we can tap into with different consequences occurring at different points on this spectrum. So for example, if you are always in the emotion or the energy in motion that we call fear, you can only get results that correspond with that energy. This is why you'll never find someone who is always fearful and then has a life that they love. You will never find someone who is in quiet desperation and then is living an abundant, fruitful life. But it works on the other end of the spectrum. You will never find someone who absolutely is in the energy and frequency and vibration of love all the time that is in a life that is full of hate and all of these different things. They do not correspond. Now, I know saying fear and love can mean many different things, so let's get even more specific with it so we can get on the same page and help with what we are going to be speaking about actually sink in. So to make this even more specific, there was an incredible researcher known as David Hawkins who actually calibrated the different levels of consciousness and did this through a massive lifetime body of work that spanned over, half a century, I believe, up until his death in, I believe it was 2011. And what's amazing about Hawkins' work is he discovered that different emotions corresponded to different levels of consciousness, and that the higher you went up the consciousness scale, the more, we'll say, profitable or the more beneficial the emotion and the effects were. Meaning, the higher you went up the scale, you were getting into emotions or energies or consciousness levels like courage, willingness, acceptance, love, joy, even enlightenment. And the lower down you went in the scale, you were getting to emotions like anger and pride, apathy, fear, guilt, and shame. What was also observed is that depending on the level of consciousness you dwelled in, which just means you stayed on, it would produce different effects in your life. For example, if you were in fear, which is on the lower end of the consciousness scale, typically things that were not beneficial would happen in your life, and you would get other things that are on a similar frequency to fear. Like I said, you will never see someone who operates in fear who then gets all of these loving things in their life. How can they? If you're on a radio station that only plays jazz, well, you can stay on that station as long as you want, you're not going to get any songs that are rock and roll. You need to change the station. And in the same way here, we need to change our consciousness and the lens we are looking at things through in order for new things to come in our life. But if we move up the consciousness scale to say courage or willingness or acceptance or to even love, then the effects are going to be much different. Now, what does this have to do with us communicating with the universe? Well, the way we communicate with the universe and also our openness to receive communication back will be dependent on the level of consciousness that we are in. When you are in the lower levels of consciousness, you actually have less energy to work with. They're more what's called force-based. In fact, in Hawking's book, Power versus Force, he named it this for this reason. Essentially, he said that anything above the level of 200 is when you're getting into the realm of power, meaning you have a lot of energy to work with. And when you're below 200 in emotions like pride and anger, fear, guilt, and shame, and apathy, you're getting into the realm of force, where you're having to force things to make them work in your life, where when you're in power, things happen more effortlessly and easily because you're connecting to these very powerful things. So essentially, the higher you are on that consciousness scale, the closer to source you are, the more power and energy you have to work with, and the more guidance you're also going to receive back. Where you can think of it like when you're on the lower end of this scale, it's almost like that communication is getting tighter and tighter where you can barely hear it, and it's being constricted, where when you move further up, this channel starts opening up, which allows the communications to become much clearer. Essentially, the universe or life will respond to us based on the level of consciousness we are operating from. Now, we are going to go over how each of these show up, an amazing tool that we have been given to know where we are on this scale. So if you're like, I don't know where I am on the consciousness scale, don't worry, we're going to go over how you can start to discern that. And we're also going to go over how to raise your consciousness level, how to raise your vibration, where you're going to be bringing in more of what you want into your life. Again, we want to make this very practical, otherwise it becomes information you just won't be able to use. But in this way, we're going to go over how you can start raising your consciousness and how you can then start communicating, again, to the universe, source, greater consciousness system, God, doesn't matter what label you give it. But when you have it communicating with you, again, it's going to show you exactly what you need to do to start living the life you want to live more of. So like we mentioned, we live in a very emotional, in the sense of energy in motion, energy, frequency, and vibration universe. And it is through our own emotions, which is energy in motion, that lets us or gives us an indication of how we are communicating to the universe or what we are communicating. We do not communicate to the universe through words. Words are empty to the universe unless there is an emotion behind them. It only really pays attention again to the energy you are communicating from, not necessarily the words or even the thoughts that you have. It really is the energy behind it all. So in this case, words can help if they help elicit a certain emotion within you. For example, gratitude practices really help because when you're thinking of things you're grateful for or speaking them out loud, what typically happens? You start feeling grateful. But if you start listing out things you're grateful for, but you don't start feeling grateful, then it's empty and won't have any effect. Even worse, if you start listing out things you're grateful for, again, grateful for, and you start feeling terrible, well then you're not actually communicating gratitude, you're communicating that terrible feeling, or perhaps feeling of lack, or perhaps feeling of fear. Behind it all is the energy, the emotion, the energy in motion, and that is going to determine the consciousness level you are operating from. Again, to look at it another way, this is why affirmations work for some people and affirmations don't work for most people. Why? Because the affirmations are meaningless unless there is emotion behind them. If you say affirmations and you are never developing a charge and emotion that is positive behind them, they aren't going to work. They have no power, no charge behind them. They are just empty words, hollow words, and potentially even harmful words. If you say affirmations, for example, I am a millionaire, and that just makes you feel fear or lack or something similar. Then what are you communicating outwards? You're communicating lack. You're communicating fear. However, if you say certain affirmations and they make you feel grateful, they make you feel abundant, they make you feel good, well, now we're cooking. But understand and recognize that it is the emotion behind them that is allowing it to actually cook or to actually work for you. Now, the great thing is, like I mentioned, there is something within you, an amazing, amazing tool that you were born with that will help you do a variety of things. The first thing it will let you do is let you know where you are in this moment currently on the emotional or consciousness scale. And the next thing it will do is to help move you up the scale and move you in the direction of things that are actually going to be beneficial to you. And this is called the emotional guidance system. Many people have spoken about this. Abraham Hicks is a big one who really is a proponent for the emotional guidance system. I believe Bouchard says it in different words. I've read it in Conversations with God, in so many different texts and things that are really pointing at truth. They go over this thing called the emotional guidance system. So this system is always trying to lead you to higher levels of consciousness, and it will make you very aware of your relationship towards things that don't line up with it. However, most people have been conditioned to ignore their emotional guidance system, so it takes some practice to reactivate it. Now, your emotional guidance system works very differently than your intellect. These are kind of polar opposites. They work very differently in the fact that your intellect will try and justify things, it'll try and reason things and all of this different stuff and create arguments, pros and cons to why you should or shouldn't do anything. But also understand your intellect can only ever operate from the known, meaning it is pulling things that you have already experienced or things you already know to try and give you answers about certain things, which can be very useful. But if you're trying to step into the unknown, or you're trying to create new results in your life, it isn't going to be very useful because it only operates from the known. The emotional guidance system, however, has access to all of it, including the unknown. And because of this, it will only give you what's called binary answers. And that means a yes or a no. It will not analyze things, and it will not give you reasons why you should or shouldn't do anything. It will only give you a feeling. And the feeling usually looks like this, either a pulling you towards or pushing you away, as in don't move in that direction. Typically, it is an excitement or a very heavy feeling. The excitement meaning, yes, 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 this is going to lead you further down the path. The heavy feeling to no, 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 this is going to move you away from the things that you want and the things that will be beneficial for you. And we've all felt that pit in the stomach kind of like constricting, like kind of feeling towards certain things, and then done it anyway, and then typically it's not ended up being a really good result. And we've all felt that super excited feeling, and we didn't question it, and we just did it, usually typically with a very good result. So essentially you can ask yourself when it comes to this, does this thing that I'm looking at expand me or does it contract me? If it expands you, it is your emotional guidance system essentially giving you a green light to go do that thing. If it contracts, it is basically giving you a red light and telling you look elsewhere. So when you get excited, joyful, or curious about something, it is usually your emotional guidance system telling you that going in that direction will be expansive for you, which means it will be growth oriented, it'll be something that's good for you. And if you feel a contraction, it's usually feedback that this will not serve you at the highest level and it is going to be to your detriment. Now, from time to time, you may also get what we could call a yellow light, which is essentially you're not getting here either of those, and it's just kind of a, hey, wait for a second, be still, and let's see more stuff come through before we make a move here. Now, we're going to go over how to activate this part of you more powerfully later in the video. Again, I'm going to give you the practical tools to this, but understand that you do have an emotional guidance system, and that emotional guidance system is trying to lead you in a progressive way. It is trying to lead you to higher levels of consciousness. It is trying to lead you to expansion, but you have to follow it and understand that it will be leading you into the unknown, outside of your comfort zone. The analytical mind will try and keep you within the comfort zone and cannot lead you to the unknown because it only can do things from the known and things it has picked up previously. Now, one last thing I want you to understand before we move on to the tools is why it is so crucial to understand this emotional part of yourself, or how powerful it is in your life. Because understand that the outer world actually follows the inner world. Now, what does that mean? The outer world is the world of the senses. It's the world you're looking at and experiencing at this very moment. It is the physical, materialistic world. But the inner world is the quantum. This is the world made up of your thoughts, of your spirit or emotions. It is the world of energy, frequency, and vibration. Again, which Tesla said, if you want to know the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Essentially, your emotions go the furthest to creating your reality. Again, all of it is important. That doesn't mean neglect the physical. It doesn't mean neglect the mental, because that plays a huge part as well. But like mentioned earlier, the emotions, the energy that you're sending off is really the foundation. It is really what's going to move things in your life. And so if you're going around all the time reacting negatively, if you're in fear and lower levels of consciousness, that is going to be recreated through the people, events, opportunities, and everything else in your life. You're also going to get a lot of feedback from your emotional guidance system to try and move you away from that. And you will also get feedback that's going to be very painful because it's trying to turn you away from what you're currently doing towards a new path in the unknown that's going to produce better results. I've gone over this in plenty of other videos, but just to reiterate very quickly, you are a three-part being made up of the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. And it's important to understand this because most people only put emphasis on the physical, but most of your reality is created from the mental and the emotional or the spiritual. And when you start creating from that place, you create new effects on the physical. Understand that 99.9+% of reality is actually empty space and energy, frequency, and vibration. And so if you're not paying attention to that, if you're not intentionally creating certain causes on the spiritual and mental plane, which make up that 99.9+% of this reality from which the physical reality is born out of, if you are not creating certain causes or activating certain causes that benefit you on that plane, you can forget about good things happening in the physical. But when you create good effects, if you activate certain effects on the spiritual and then the mental as well, you will start seeing the natural effects from those causes appearing in the physical. And again, one of the main ones here is the emotion, energy in motion. So essentially, the physical is born out of these two other inner planes, which are known as the inner world. The outer world follows the inner world. Whatever you are doing in the inner world is what's going to be produced in some form in the physical. This works every single time for every single person. So if you don't learn to use the language of emotions to communicate with the universe, to send out your energetic signal, you will never be able to create the life that you want, and you will be essentially thrown around by the waves and winds of life rather than being the captain of your own ship. Now, I know this is blunt, but it's what I've seen time and time again consistently in myself, my clients, my peers, and so on. And it works that way again every single time. Again, we take people through a 6-month reality creation program where we keep them in the room and we help them stick to this level of communication from an emotional and mental level, and the results they get are absolutely profound. We're talking life-changing, complete 180s where they're completely creating new effects in their life, and it doesn't even look the same that it did when they started. Now, if you want to learn more, I will leave a link in the description, first one, where you can learn more about the program, what it looks like, and whether or not it will be a good fit for you. But do understand that this is law. This is a principle. This is not something that I'm pulling out my butt. This is something that people have known in certain circles for generations. There are certain civilizations that have known this for thousands of years. It just hasn't hit the mainstream because, frankly, there are people who are vested or have an interest in it not hitting the mainstream, because there are a lot of people who don't want powerful creators of their own destiny out there. They want people who will be obedient and follow certain things that benefit them. So I don't want to get too conspiratorial here, so just keep in mind that the outer world, the physical world, follows the lead of your inner world, and your emotions are the main way in which you influence and communicate from your inner world. So let's get to some tools. Like I mentioned, there is what we could call the universe GPS. And we really want to start dialing this in, because if you're in lower levels of consciousness, it's kind of like you haven't put in anything in the GPS and you have nowhere, you don't know where to go. You feel like you have very little choice. You're running into a brick wall, you play the victim to the brick wall, and you don't really make much progress. But when you calibrate the universal GPS, again, it is like the universe will communicate with you and say, hey, go left here, go right here, go straight. You'll know exactly what move you need to make. Again, and I want to reiterate this, it will not justify or analyze or give you some intellectual reason why you should or shouldn't do something. It will pull you emotionally and energetically towards the thing that you're meant to follow, or towards the thing that will benefit you. There will be this energetic excitement and pull. And if you follow that guidance of your emotions, again, emotional universe, it uses those emotions to communicate which direction to go in. And so when you feel excited about something, it is not happen chance. It is not something that just fell in your lap randomly. It is a communication from the greater consciousness system that you should move in this direction. However, if you have trouble feeling excited, if your emotions are all over the place, it's going to be very difficult to do this. And that might be the position you're in, and we can all use some work with this as well. So let's go over some tools that are going to help you to connect more to this excitement, which activates the GPS, so that it becomes very clear what the next steps are. So again, that constricted line of communication that you might be working with loosens up and opens up and becomes a channel for this excitement and information from the universe to come through much more cleanly. Again, it's like having a hose pipe that's all gunked up. Even if you turn the hose on, it's not going to get through. So let's remove the gunk so the communication can come through, you can feel the excitement, and it becomes a lot easier to know which direction to go. And so the first tool I want to give you, again, is the shadow work. I go over this all the time because it is so crucial. The shadow work is essentially allowing you to let go and release or integrate so much of this gunk in the hose pipe that's preventing you from communicating properly with the greater consciousness system, the universe, or whatever you want to call it. Without this, again, you are limiting your ability to activate the GPS and move in the ways that you want or communicate with the universe. The higher your level of consciousness, the easier communication becomes, because the higher your level of consciousness, the closer to source you get. And the closer to source you get is the difference between a tiny whisper that you can barely hear communicating to you to someone whispering in your ear clearly and audibly. And so the higher we can get on that scale, the better. But when we don't do the shadow work and there's all this gunk in your system, all of these blocks, it prevents the energy from getting through. It makes it more difficult for you to raise yourself in consciousness or stay in a higher level of consciousness, because this gunk, what it does is it triggers you back into the lower levels of consciousness. The name of the game is being able to dwell in the higher levels of consciousness, not just visit them every now and then, but live from that place. When you are living from a higher level of consciousness, you are going to be winning the game of life like nothing else. And you will hear and feel, again, hearing in the sense of feeling these communications energetically through excitement and other ways. You're going to be actually able to experience these communications more often. So we need to do the shadow work. Now again, this is a whole video in and of itself, so what I will do is at the end of this video, link you to a shadow work video I created that goes over some of the best techniques, how to do this, and everything else. So be on the lookout towards the end of this video where I will give you that as a resource. Now I want to talk about something called infinite action, which in a sense I just alluded to in that one, in the previous one on shadow work, because you are always in the now. You are always sending out a signal. And so it is not about you every now and then going to a higher level of consciousness. It is not about every now and then following your excitement. You want to make this something that you live from, because you're in what's called infinite action, meaning at every moment, every second, in every now moment, in every unit of time, and then the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one, you are sending out an energy, a frequency, a vibration that is being received by the greater consciousness system and responded to. And so you could feel love for 5 seconds and you will send that out. But then if you feel anger and pride and apathy and guilt and shame and all these other things for the rest of the day, what kind of thing are you going to receive back? Do you think that's going to open up the channel of communication to excitement and leading you down a good path? Or do you think that's going to restrict it and create more clogs in the hose pipe? It's going to do the latter. And this is why it's so crucial to understand and take more conscious control of your day-to-day, moment-to-moment, because you need to recognize that you're always sending out that signal energetically. This is why if we can dwell from a higher level of consciousness, we're sending that out most of the time, all of this starts to become smooth. Everything starts to flow easily and effortlessly. I know you've heard this idea that life can be easy and effortless, that manifestation can be easy and effortless, and maybe you don't believe it, but it is absolutely true. But what it looks like is someone who is dwelling at the higher levels of consciousness has removed the gunk or is continually removing the gunk from the hose pipe, so it is easy to communicate with Source. And when it is easy to communicate with Source, it's easy to know what the next move is. Oh, I take a left here, then a right here, and then I go straight here, and it becomes easier and easier and easier. So recognize that you are in infinite action. You know, the energy you're sending out every single moment is making a difference. The energy you dwell in most of the time is making a difference, which is why things like the shadow work is so important. One other thing I will tell you that's so important is something called your mental diet. This is another one I go over quite often because of the value of it. And essentially think of it like this. The best example I can give you is with our regular diets, with food. If you eat a bunch of junk food, what happens? You put on weight. You feel like crap. You have less energy. Well, the same thing occurs with your mental diet. Meaning, if you are watching things at a lower level of consciousness, if you are consuming things at a lower level of consciousness, if you are engaging in conversations that are at a lower level of consciousness, if you are absorbing it through your eyes, through your ears, through anything else, then that is affecting your mental diet. And so if you have a mental diet that would make you obese, so to speak, guess what kind of signal you're going to be sending out? Not a very good one. If you have a mental diet that consists of things that are in a consciousness level of fear, or things that are in a consciousness level of guilt and shame and apathy and pride and anger and all these different things, well then that's the signal you're sending out. And so I would implore you and invite you to start removing things that put you in that place, and then start adding things that consist of higher levels of consciousness. Meaning in the same way in a regular diet that we remove the junk food and then add the healthy food, in this case remove the junk media or the junk low consciousness activities and things you consume and replace them with high conscious stuff. Whether it's videos like this, books are a great place to do this because there are a ton of high conscious books, not so much with movies, but they exist out there. For example, movies like The Matrix can be considered higher conscious. Movies like, if you've ever watched Powder, is a really good one. The 13th Floor. There's a lot out there. I can't think of all of them because actually there are so few, but there are a few movies. The Great Blue is another good one. There are a few movies out there that do calibrate at a higher level of consciousness, but all in all, most of that kind of media is going to be lower, at pride, usually at the highest. Maybe you'll get some at courage, but ultimately, what does your mental diet consist of? Because whatever you're consuming there, you're going to be putting out back into the universe. And next, I would encourage you and invite you to have some daily inner world modality that helps you to essentially go into your inner world and influence the spiritual and mental planes of your existence. Again, if reality is 99.9+% empty space energy, and you're only putting attention in the physical, do you think that's having a good effect or a bad effect in your life. So I would highly recommend picking up some kind of habit if you haven't already, like a meditation or visualization habit. Breath work's another good one, something that really helps you tune up and engage that inner world we're talking about. Now, I do have a video that goes over visualization. You can just find it in my videos. That goes over something called a passive active meditation or visualization. This is one of the most powerful methods that I know of to do this. It's something I highly recommend you do daily. Again, it's something that we give our clients in EMF and show them how to go really deep with it, that we give them in there, and it's just so powerful. And it benefits you and basically guarantees that every single day you are doing the inner world work that, again, is influencing your outer world. Now, I've thrown a lot at you, so feel free to watch this again or take notes so that you can absorb it all. There's so much just golden nuggets in here that are going to help you to, again, really be able to communicate with the universe, know exactly what the next move is, and everything else. However, I did promise you a shadow work video, which I will put up here. Again, letting go and shadow work techniques are, I think, some of the most potent techniques in the world of self-development, because when you do these things absolutely begin to change.